Play clock at 5. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
This play ended the dynasty of the Seattle Seahawks. It's a shame because this organization was on the right track to becoming one of the best franchises in the NFL. They have the fans, they have the unbelievable home field advantage, they were fun and had cool uniforms, and they didn't care what you thought about them. And ever since that play, the Seahawks have just been declining every year. Now let's backtrack a little bit. If you've seen my video about USC football, Pete Carroll left for the Seahawks after all the NCAA stuff was about to surface at USC. And when he got to Seattle, it's not like he was taking over a bad Seahawks organization. They went to the Super Bowl in 2005 with Mike Holmgren, and made it to the divisional round in the playoffs in 2006 and 2007. But after the 2007 season, Mike Holmgren decided he was going to be the head coach for just one more year. So he was basically a lame duck, while defensive coordinator Jim Mora would take over as head coach the following season. In Mike's last season in 2008, the Seahawks finished 4-12, and Jim's official season as head coach would begin in 2009. But after finishing 5-11 in 2009, the Seahawks fired Jim Mora, and they looked in a different route because he was just not the right fit. Now down in Southern California, Pete Carroll and USC were one of the biggest programs in college football. But due to a messy situation at USC, everything ended in a mess, and Pete Carroll decided to leave and take the head coaching job for the Seattle Seahawks. When he got hired there, the Seahawks needed to find a GM to make decisions, and they hired John Schneider of the Green Bay Packers. John and Pete were supposed to be a collaborative effort, where they could combine both their ideas to make team decisions. This worked well because their first draft together they took Russell Okung, Golden Tate, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor. The Seahawks didn't have high expectations entering the year. They were supposed to be a middle-of-the-pack team. They had a very solid quarterback in Matt Hasselbeck, but he wasn't a superstar. In that 2010 season, the Seahawks finished 7-9, but since they played in such a weak division, they ended up making the playoffs and were the first team ever with a losing record to do that while playing a full season. In their playoff game, they faced the Saints, and I just remember this game being such a back-and-forth battle. But thanks to running back Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks were able to pull away and shock the world. Then in the next round, they had to go on the road and play Chicago, but they lost at Soldier Field, and that ended their miracle playoff run. The 2011 season, the Seahawks had an eye for talent, bringing in a CFL corner in Brandon Browner and undrafted free agent wide receiver Doug Baldwin. These guys were two great gets. Then they drafted KJ Wright, Byron Maxwell, Malcolm Smith, and Richard Sherman, who all had huge impacts, especially Wright and Sherman. And Malcolm Smith messed around and won a Super Bowl MVP versus the Broncos, but we will get to that soon. But the 2011 season was a letdown due to the quarterback play. The Seahawks decided not to re-sign Matt Hasselbeck, and they went to free agency and signed Vikings backup Tavares Jackson, while Charlie Whitehurst would serve as backup. They finished 7-9, but the next season was going to be a different story. The 2012 season, the NFL switched over to Nike, and the Seahawks got new uniforms, which I believe played a big part in their identity shift over there. With their first two picks in the draft, they took linebackers Bruce Irvin and Bobby Wagner. But with their third draft pick, they decided to take quarterback Russell Wilson, who was going to be a franchise quarterback that they needed. He had to compete with free agent quarterback Matt Flynn for the starting job, but Russell always has been proving people wrong, so this was going to be a walk in the park for him. And throughout the preseason, they had a QB battle, but Russell looked really good and he ended up winning the starting job. The Seahawks finished the 2012 season with 11-5 record and made the playoffs. They played the Redskins in the first round and won 24-14. And in the second round, they lost at Atlanta 30-28. That season was a huge improvement. Considering they almost made the NFC Championship game, the Seahawks had 6 Pro Bowlers and 4 All-Pro players, and it looked like they were going to be a Super Bowl contender for years to come. The 2013 season, the Seahawks were ready. Russell Wilson looked like a seasoned pro after 1 year. They had a really good running back in Marshawn Lynch, who could make big plays when they needed him to. And their defense was extremely talented and arguably the best in the NFL. The Seahawks went 13-3 in the regular season and were the number 1 seed in the NFC. They beat the Saints 23-15 in the divisional round, and then they beat the 49ers 23-17 in the NFC Championship. In the Super Bowl, they had to face the Broncos and Peyton Manning in New York. From the first snap of the game, the Seahawks had control and won the Super Bowl 43-8. The 2014 season, the Seahawks had huge expectations again. It was Super Bowl or bust. They went 12-4 and played the Panthers in the first round of the playoffs, winning 31-17. In the next round versus the Packers, they had a miracle comeback and won in overtime 28-22. In the Super Bowl, they had to face the Patriots, and this was going to go down as one of the best Super Bowls ever played. Now we all know what happened. The Seahawks were up, and Brady was able to come back and get the Patriots in the lead. And then that long pass to Jermaine Kearse put the Seahawks in the red zone. And we all know that if they would have ran Marshawn Lynch, they probably would have won. But Pete Carroll called a passing play, and the Patriots were ready, and the rest is history. But how could this be the downfall of the Seattle Seahawks? Well, let me explain. The 2015 season, they looked to be just as good, finishing 10-2 7-6 and making the playoffs. But they beat the Vikings in an extremely close game and could have lost if that kick went in. But it didn't go in, so let's not play revisionist history. The next round they lost to a team that went to the Super Bowl in the Panthers, and they lost by a touchdown. Even though they went out on a loss, it still wasn't that bad of a year. Then in 2016 they finished with a 10-5-1 record, while beating the Lions in the wildcard game 26-6, before losing to another team that went to the Super Bowl in the Falcons 36-20. So again, they lost to the NFC champion in the playoffs. Last year they went 9-7 and missed the playoffs, but they still had a winning record, and relatively it wasn't a bad year. They just had a lot of injuries and everything that went wrong. So now let's talk about this year and everything that's really going wrong. The roster is not the same. And I'm not just talking about the roster, I'm talking about the culture as well. Good old Pete Carroll. No one ever sees any wrong in this man because he's a happy-go-lucky guy. He will motivate the heck out of you. But this year I heard him say that all the roster turnover reminds him of being a college coach. But that didn't scare me until I realized that he hasn't been replacing the talent. The Seahawks now don't have Richard Sherman, their all-pro corner who was the face of the Seahawks in many ways. They done pissed off Marshawn Lynch so bad the man retired. But he still returned to the NFL and plays for the Raiders now, so take that for what it's worth. Cam Chancellor, Cliff Averill, Brandon Mebane, Byron Maxwell, Bruce Irvin, Malcolm Smith, and Michael Bennett are all gone. Even though he still plays for them, Earl Thomas doesn't look thrilled to be there in Seattle, and he will most likely be gone by next year. Did I also mention that basically all the Seahawks have now is Russell Wilson? And even he doesn't have enough time to throw the ball thanks to his offensive line. But enough ranting. Do I think the Seahawks are really a downfall? Yes. I know that hurts to hear, but you guys still have a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. He just needs some help around him, and this could get fixed. I don't really like making these downfall videos because it pisses a lot of the fans off. But when you look at it from an outsider's perspective, you can understand how the Seahawks really are just not a top team in the NFL. Do I think they should fire Pete Carroll and maybe even fire GM John Schneider? Honestly, I think it makes sense. And I love Pete to death. He really is a special coach that is really good in a short period of time. And I think his message just isn't working, and when you hit that stage, it's time to look for a change. And when the roster is not cutting it, you need to look in a different direction in the front office and the scouting department. I mean, when I talked about all the guys the Seahawks drafted, I'm still blown away because they were nailing all their picks. But now, they can't get any of them right, and it seems most people are scratching their heads at what exactly the front office is drafting. Now, I'm not saying this is just from my perspective. This is just the broad consensus. And listen, I could make this video an hour long and go in depth on everything, but this is just a quick summary of what I think has happened. And nothing I said is new, but I hope I wrapped it up in a neat little bow for you. Thanks for watching.